There are 7 main processes that all living organisms have to be able to perform. The first is transport, and this is how an organism is going to get what they need to all of their cells. Some organisms are going to do osmosis and diffusion, and those are going to be like your bacteria, protists, fungi, and all of your non-vascular plants. There are 2 types of systems that are involved with transporting materials to cells. The first is what we call an open system, and this is when fluids within the body move freely, and so arthropods are a good example of an organism that have an open system. And insects, spiders, and crabs are all considered arthropods. The opposite of that is a closed system, and this is when our fluids in a body move through tubes. So in vascular plants, those tubes are called xylem and phloem, which is moving water for xylem, and phloem is moving glucose. Vertebrates are going to use veins and arteries, so veins are going to be going towards the heart, arteries are moving away from the heart. And in invertebrates, they're going to use vessels, which is very similar to veins and arteries. The second main process is excretion, and this is how an organism is going to remove its metabolic wastes. Some organisms are going to do osmosis and diffusion, like your bacteria, protists, fungi, and non-vascular plants. Other organisms are going to have internal structures that allow them to do this. With vertebrates, us for example, we use kidneys. Insects are going to use what we call Malpighian tubules. And earthworms are going to use what they call nephridia, which are almost like tiny kidneys. The third main process is respiration, and this is how organisms are going to release their gases. Osmosis and diffusion would be like your bacteria and protists, non-vascular plants and fungi. And there are a couple of adaptations for respiration. The first are what we call stomata, and these are small openings on leaves in vascular plants. Skin, so a lot of our annelids or earthworms and baby amphibians are going to respire through their skin or do gas exchange through their skin. Fish and juvenile amphibians are going to use gills, and adult amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds are going to use lungs to exchange gas. The fourth main process is nutrition. So there are 2 main types of organisms on how they obtain their energy. Autotrophs are also known as producers, and heterotrophs are also known as consumers. The autotrophs cannot make their own can make their own food. So some of them are going to be protists, like your euglena and algae. Some bacteria can do it through a process called chemosynthesis, meaning they use chemicals to make a food source instead of the sunlight. And all of your plants are considered autotrophs. Protists, such as a paramecium and amoeba, would fall under a heterotroph. Some bacteria are also heterotrophic, and our fungi are heterotrophic, or decomposers. And most or all of the animals that we're familiar with. There are a couple of structures that are used to help break down food. 2 of those are called a crop and a gizzard. And these are found in earthworms and birds, and it's almost like an extra stomach to help break down material. And with vertebrates, we have mouths, stomachs, and intestines to aid in the digestion of food. The 5th main process is regulation and response, and this is how an organism is going to respond to its environment or a stimulus. So again, osmosis and diffusion is the main mechanism for bacteria and protists. There's also another type is animal behavior. So there are 2 types that we'll talk about later, innate and learned. So invertebrates have what they call a ganglia, and that's just a mass of nerve cells that is used to respond to a stimulus. Vertebrates have a central nervous system, and your central nervous system is composed of your brain and your spinal cord. So we can communicate with nerve cells, and these nerve cells will actually send signals to one another. So this is a picture of what 2 nerve cells would look like. Here is what we call an axon. This is the part of the nerve cell that receives a message. It will pass that signal on to the second nerve cell, but the second part that's attached to the axon is what we call dendrites. So the axon of one nerve cell passes the message on to the dendrites of another nerve cell. And they do that using something called a sodium-potassium pump, where they exchange these molecules across their membrane in order to pass that electrical charge. There are also a couple of plant responses. So with plants, it's positive if the plant's moving towards the stimulus, and it's considered negative if it's moving away from the stimulus. So there's a couple of types. Phototropism, photo means light, tropism means response. That's the response towards light. Hydrotropism is the response to water. Gravitropism is the response to gravity. And thigmotropism is the response to touch. And again, those only occur in plants.